Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the Catalyst Weekly Astrology Report. We're going to be looking at the full moon that's happening on the 20th of October. Today is the 15th of October, and full moon on the 20th. Jupiter and Mercury both stationing direct on the 18th. We've got our moon in Aquarius, going to be moving through Aquarius, going to be moving through Pisces over the weekend. Get ready for all the feels. And of course, we're going to have the sun in a trine to Jupiter today in Libra, and there are a ton of starseed activations that are happening over the weekend. Spica, Arcturus with the sun and Mars. Venus is in a conjunction with Antares. We're going to talk about that today as well. And of course, the big culminating point, which is that our full moon will be in direct conjunction with the Andromeda Galaxy. So if you saw on the image today for this transmission, or this report actually, you'll see that that is in fact the Andromeda Galaxy, very similar to our Milky Way galaxy. It is in fact our closest galactic neighbor. And according to astrophysicists and cosmologists at this time, the evidence points to a potential coming back together, or a potential collision between our Milky Way galaxy and Andromeda Galaxy. And Antares actually, as a star, when we start getting into more of the starseed, outside of the third dimensional aspects, Antares has actually got a direct connection to Andromeda Galaxy, literally a direct connection. And Antares as a star functions as a stargate or a wormhole into the Andromeda Galaxy. So we're going to talk about Andromeda and the beings from Andromeda Galaxy, the starseed archetype, and the signature of the Andromedan starseeds, because you're going to see that, we kind of feel, I know that we feel like we're in a lull right now, and I've seen it and I've been feeling it, and certainly some measure of maybe some measure of just like, is it really Red October? Is anything actually happening? And on some level, it does feel like when we come to these lulls in outward activity or manifestation, it's the perfect opportunity for people to get complacent, right? Or to kind of bury their heads back in the sand, or think that there is some measure of progress on the outside that maybe isn't happening. But what I will say is that we've known about this, right? This time period is for us to get our ducks in a row, to practice and take the opportunity. Sorry, I got something in my eye here. Take the opportunity to find our still point with the whatever's coming at us, right? Whatever we're experiencing, and everybody's different right now. We all are having different challenges that are providing opportunities right now to find that stillness, because Pluto and Saturn, even though they're now technically direct, these are big planets with not like large. I mean, Saturn's pretty large and in terms of mass, but they have large cycles. They're far away. They encompass large cycles of time, large cohorts of people, large institutional frameworks. And so when they station direct, it's just like any big type of machinery. For instance, it takes a little bit for it to kick on and start moving. If you've ever used like a really big piece of machinery, and even any kind of machinery, honestly, when you start it up, you got to give it time to warm up, right? It's getting warmed up. And this is what Pluto and Saturn feel like. It's starting to warm up. They've kicked on, right? The engine is kicked on, right? We got the spark and they're moving forward now, but they are still building momentum. Now, what's going to be more of the, what do you need what are the three things you need for a combustion engine? This is a good way to think about this. You need spark, you need fuel, and you need air. Mercury stationing direct is in Libra on the 18th is going to be our air. Jupiter stationing direct in Aquarius is going to be our air. So there's going to be the infusion of the air in order to really get the motor going now that we have fuel, and we certainly have spark in some ways. Because with Pluto and Saturn stationing direct, they're starting to turn on now. And once Jupiter and Mercury both station direct on the 18th, we're going to, I feel like that's going to be real, and the spark as well, right? It's going to all be Jupiter being that spark, right? Ruling Sagittarius, the friction. And a moon coming into Aries, of course. I mean, that's really the spark if you really want to get technical about Aries and the type of fire that Aries represents. So it feels like nothing's happening, although things are definitely happening. But take the opportunity now to practice finding that still point, right? We're only halfway, we're not even halfway through this lunar cycle. The full moon is going to show us quite a bit about who's supporting us, who's surrounding us, what it means to live in a social context that is fair and peaceful and balanced, what it means to be supported by those around you, and to you also being part of that support mechanism. How it allows us each to then really come into our awareness of what it means to be free and independent, and hold those in power accountable. That's a big part of this full moon as well. So I'm going to be honest, I'm not entirely ready to give this report. It's, it's been a whirlwind of traveling and really having to put on a hat that puts my emotional, I wouldn't say emotional needs, but my emotional processing aside for a later time. And I'm pretty pleased, honestly, with the moon in Aquarius right now for this time, because this has allowed us to really kind of detach from the intensity of the emotions, to not identify them with them right now, in order to really move through this time. Now that's going to change. As soon as the moon comes into Pisces today and into tomorrow, we're going to have all the feels, right? And the moon will meet Neptune. So I can already feel, and I've already experienced, and I know other people are as well. I just know based on their reporting to me that, the dreamscape and the subconscious work is starting to ramp up again, even though, the Schumann resonance has been pretty mellow, and I'll show you the chart in a minute here the Schumann chart before we get into the astrology. So what's happening is very deep right now, deep below the surface, deep within ourselves, deep within the collective unconscious. There are things that are moving and things that are happening, and certainly people are actually taking action to create the reality that they want to be in, actually taking action, people filing lawsuits, people filing other types of court orders, right? Actually taking the steps one foot in front of the other to assert our freedom and independence. We are still free on paper, at least in this country. So we need to act like it. So, but I do feel in my own way, and other people reporting to me, and just kind of like the landscape out there, that it seems like things are not happening, or if they are happening, they are, in some ways maybe a distraction. Perhaps they are things that are seemingly minor, but actually providing the building blocks for a larger foundation. So, but this is a time to really, like I said, to take advantage of this quiet. If it's quiet for you, if it's too quiet for you, take advantage of this moment, be able to lean into that, to feel into that, what that feels like, so that when it's not quiet again, you can bring that back into your awareness and into your reality, into your feeling body, so that you can remember what it's like to have that quiet, because this is what October's for, is to practice this. And that doesn't mean, like I said, it doesn't mean things aren't happening. And so everybody's job is different, right? Everybody's job is different. Everybody's mission is very specific to the overall goal. And the more that you are able to get into your stillness, into your quiet, into your own gut, and really listen, the more you're going to know exactly what role, unique unique and important role that you are going to play. And so with all these starseed activations over the weekend coming into the full moon, this is a really good opportunity for us who align with this mission to really take advantage of this. Venus in conjunction with Antares is not going to be easy. So just keep that in mind as well. Like, it does feel quiet, but now that she's in conjunction with Antares, I mean, the heart of the Scorpion, right? And Venus is very much about our sensitivity to the world around us and what we value. And so I found that to be expressed very personally for me over the last 2 days, right? About what that means to face head on with some of these themes about our mortality and our vulnerability, and in some ways feeling reliant on other systems in order to get back to a state of balance and wellness, and how important it is that we have each other. It's really, really important. And of course that came up in the reading just before on Wednesday morning, how important those bonds, right? The lattice work of our bonds is so important. So I want to show you the Schumann just to show you how much is not happening, which is, and there's not a ton of solar weather, right? There is some coronal holes that are coming back into Earth facing, but there's not really any sunspots. I think there's like one sunspot right now, and things are pretty calm. And even though there was a CME that was released early this morning, I think, or last night, it's really not going to, it may graze us, but right now it doesn't seem to cause any concern. So taking the opportunity for the calmness, and especially with the moon and coming into Pisces, that is such and meeting Neptune, boy, we get direct access right into our own subconscious, right into our intuitive landscape and our feeling body, to the feeling experience of the collective. And this transcends space and time and physical boundaries, because in Pisces none of those exist, right? It is just right back to the source of all with Pisces. And this is about unconditional love and forgiveness and agape, right? And compassion, right? The compassion that the rattlesnake has come up so many times now, that we are being initiated into our role as a healer, that we are connecting to suffering, either our own or other people's, in this moment, in order to have and cultivate real compassion, right? Because it's very easy. This is how they pull us into like the divisionary tactics, the Civil War aspect, right? And it's still, it's still left versus right. It's really kind of mind-boggling to me how much people are still hyper fixated on the sides, right? And when there is no side, right? We're all here together, and we're all going to pop out the other side in one reality or another, but we're all going through that event horizon together. So thank you. I really need this coffee this morning. So let's look at the Schumann resonance for now, and I want to just show you how much is not happening. All right, here we go. So today is the 15th, right? So you can see right here, it's pretty mellow. And even these little like bloops, these little bloops that go up, they're not very loud, right? You're not getting very loud off of the baseline here. So even though there's these little like jerks and jumps in the Schumann amplitude, we're not really seeing a whole lot of activity. It's pretty calm. And so even when you scroll down to the quality, right? Same thing. And you can really see how this is interesting, though. I find that this particular graph, the red color of the graph, which I want to understand a little bit more, is certainly much more active, right? It has these dips right here, but even the quality of it is pretty mellow, and you can see even the frequency itself, right? The range here from 7.4 up to 8.10. It's pretty, it's moving, but it's it's pretty mellow. So it's mellow. There's not a whole lot going on in this realm. And so we do get a break. And I think we're going to need it, leading up to this full moon and next week in general. So we're going to look at the chart now. So good morning, Olivia. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you being here and participating in what's going on in your own life today. So here we are. We're today's astrology. Here's today's chart. So like I said, I'm not upset about the moon in Aquarius right now. Of course, I am an Aquarius rising, so it's a big part of my personality. So when the moon's there, you really do kind of identify very, very much so with yourself. So and also too, just the opportunity to really kind of like separate in some ways, not even separate or detach entirely, but to just not be in the feels, because we're going to be in them, right? When the moon comes into Pisces, we're going to, over the weekend, we're going to have direct feeling. And that's going to be, difficult in some ways, and also very beautiful and artistic and imaginative and dreamy, right? All of these, the dreamscape is going to be very intense and potent over the weekend, especially as the moon comes into that conjunction with Neptune. So just be ready for the feels. They are definitely coming. So let's see here. Let's get into it, my friends. All right. Let's go to where we are right now. Right, the moon just passed Jupiter. Okay, so, and if you look in the sky as the moon is, where I'm at least, the moon is visible over the horizon after the sun goes down. And it's just quite striking you won't see it tonight, obviously, because the moon will be past Jupiter. But last night you could see the moon, and it was like the two ears, Jupiter and Saturn on either side of the moon. It was it was like a little, the moon is getting brighter, so things are becoming more illuminated that often are embedded in the subconscious. So if your dreamscapes have been very very active and almost prophetic, or you're getting a lot of information, I mean, it's just going to keep happening, especially as we get closer to the full moon. It'll be a full-on connection to what is often hidden below the surface. What has been roiling around in there in the subconscious going to come up to the surface, and we'll cover that when I get to the full moon aspect. I'm going to just cover the weekend so that we have an idea of what to expect here. And there's tons, like I said, tons of starseed activations right now. So I want to take some time to really talk about those things, especially if you know that you have these particular connections in your chart. Then you know that, and especially where it's at in your chart, because then you know to expect some measure of familiarity and connection to this part of yourself, and in that area of your life, having it being brought forward somehow. So let's go back a little bit here, because we have the sun. First, let's talk about that. The sun is coming into a conjunction with Spica, and we've talked about fixed star Spica before. The star itself is in the fruit of the wheat, right? In the Virgo constellation. So in ancient astrology or fixed star astrology, you're going to find that Spica, whenever it was like really well aspected in the chart, the natal chart, you're going to find that it really sets the tone for wealth and riches. And when we think about currency, when we think about resources, just like food or grain, for instance, agriculture is the first real opportunity for our humanity, civilization as we know it so far. Agriculture was the first real opportunity for us as a group or as a social order to accumulate and to store resources. So Spica is in fact the resource itself is in the head of the fruit of the wheat in the Virgo constellation. And as we know, Virgo is representing the maiden, or are the Vestal Virgins, and it's the and Virgo in the chart and as an archetypal framework is surrendering to the best version of yourself, which will be of service to the collective. That is the whole point, is to surrender to yourself, to do the work under the surface, to discipline and purify yourself. And there's a sense of devotion here in the 6th house and with Virgo, in order to give, right? In order to be of service. And what are you giving? You're giving your resources that you've accumulated and brought forward through your own work into some sort of relationship or social context. And so the wealth that comes along with Spica that it brings forward is the wealth that is meant to be shared. And so Spica star seeds tend to be very rare, but I'll tell you what, that they're coming forward, very strongly right now in the clients who happen to be drawn to my work right now. A lot of them are Spica star seeds. And Arcturus is very close, and we'll talk about that too when we get into Arcturus. But there is, with the sun here right now, we are really, I think that there is this sense of really wanting to give and really wanting to be of service and really taking the resources that we have developed within ourselves and the resources that we have accumulated from our own labor in order to give and to be of service and to provide. And in a lot of ways too, it is not so much that we are creating anything that doesn't already exist, right? There's nothing new under the sun. Energy is not destroyed or created necessarily. It is repurposed. And with this type of energy, and with the sun involved specifically, and in a trine to Jupiter, I mean, that was the big thing today. That's something that's already happened today in a trine to Jupiter, is that Jupiter provides the resources, right? Jupiter is often referenced as good luck and fortune and advocate and a benefactor, right? Because it's expansive and it's expanding on the collective value system, or expanding on the collective resources in terms of our understanding and our mind and what we can create together, because the actual resource itself will be Capricorn, the physical thing that gets created as a result of our coalescing or our synthesis in Sagittarius or our alchemy, for instance. So Jupiter is the benefactor. Jupiter provides the resource or resources for this process, right? It is, and is the defender. And so this trine here, it's like the resource, when we step into this state and the state of expression, creative expression, right? The sun is about the creative expression of who we are each individually, right? We're each a node on the Aquarian, the Aquarian template, right? We're each individually a node, and that would be the Leo aspect, each of us being the brilliant node in this lattice structure of Aquarius, or this geometric pattern that Aquarius represents, and the power that moves through it. We're each one of those things. And by expressing ourselves through this, through the wealth of what we already have, and to be able to express ourselves through it, to express ourselves through the desire to want to share it, to reconstruct ourselves in order to provide something, to find balance in the social context, and to acknowledge the joy of new beginnings, right? This is about, we're not really creating or manifesting as much as acknowledging the cycle unfolding of newness, right? It's just like that spiral we talked about, that you come back around to the same place, but you're also in a different place. And so every time there's a new creation, it is in itself unique. And this is how our genetics work, right? That there's only those 4 base pairs, or those four chemicals that make up all of the base pairs in our entire genetic structure, that are the same no matter what in every biological life. Anything that has DNA has those 4 base pairs, right? But they come together in a unique fashion that creates something new, something unique, something that is your own, it's you. It has a unique signature. And so we want to provide what we discover in that way. We want to be of service, and we want to take the resources of our own labor and offer them in order to create this new structure. And so it's like in this trine today, it's actually very beautiful to have a sun in a trine to Jupiter, because Jupiter is going to provide the resources within us, right? Because Jupiter's still retrograde. So it's still working on this expansion within each of us and within the collective that we find ourselves in, especially with Aquarius. And this particular degree has been really challenging us to take every opportunity as a training moment in order to be disciplined enough to hold the energy of the collective, which is Aquarius. So this trine today that's already happened is really when we fulfill and sustain and express ourselves through this love and this devotion to creating something new, to offering what we have created as a resource for the whole. And these are the Spica star seeds. These are those who, this is their mission, right? Is at least part of their mission. So it depends on where you find it in your chart, is to really step forward in this really devoted, devotional space to give. Jupiter's giving all of the resources in order to do this, right? Within us. It's like Jupiter's expanding the resources within us in the collective, and it's like funneling its way right through the sun, and we express ourselves with those resources. And what are those resources? Well, the resources of the collective, and our ability to utilize the resources of the collective, the energetic resources of our collective, our community, our neighborhoods, the larger social context, whatever we find ourselves in. We take that and it is applied to and comes right through us in the shining of each of our individual hearts, basically, in that way. So it's like this infusion in some ways, and then comes out. You know, Jupiter is very close to what a sun would be, and because of its density and its mass, like it's the largest in the solar system, right? And it's also a gas giant, and that's all any star is just gas. And it just didn't quite activate the fusion process in order to become a star, but it's very close to it. So there's this beautiful connection when Jupiter and the sun are in like a conjunction or a trine or even a sextile, because there's such a familiarity with the mass and the ability to just create resources in some way. It's just that a star is doing it over and over again, and Jupiter just represents the capacity for our ability to do this within ourselves, I feel like, and the collective too, right? That's, again, Jupiter rules Sagittarius. These are about a collective paradigms, collective belief systems, right? Collective resources that come from a synthesis or an understanding of two opposite positions coming together and creating something. This does require that we step into this particular role or this particular archetype of wanting to give and wanting to be devoted and be of service. So if we align with this, then we do like receive the resources from the larger collective and all of our experiences that have been training us and disciplining us to be able to hold that energy. It just comes funneling right through us and out. It's very beautiful. And so it does feel in some ways that there is something positive going on right now, even though in the stillness, it seems like nothing's happening. But what's happening is that it's, again, we're just being infused with all of the things that we need. And at the same time this was happening, you do see that the moon was in conjunction with Jupiter. So we have this direct emotional and intuitive connection to Jupiter. And so it's like, and that means that the moon is in a trine to the sun. So this was a beautiful opportunity this morning to really connect in to each other, and our desire, and like a real devotional desire to bring our labors forward in service and in giving. And we have so many resources that with the moon having that direct connection to Jupiter too, we become very, very aware emotionally what our resources are in this moment. So without being attached to them, without identifying with the emotion itself, but to use it as a power source in order to then be able to express ourselves through this devotional giving of what we have labored for ourselves. This was very nice. And that's, this is going to I think this is going to move us forward through the weekend with the moon in Pisces, where we then can connect very directly to people and their emotional experiences in order to give from there, right, through the role of compassion and forgiveness and unconditional love. The trouble today. So we see that Mercury now is coming into the degree, for the most part, that it's going to station direct at this 10 to 11 degrees of Libra. So Mercury is going to be slowing down, right, as it prepares to start stationing direct. So it's going to stay in this degree now for throughout the weekend up until it does station direct. And this particular degree of Libra is about the trouble and the, you got problem solve in some ways to figure out how you're going to, and this is the degree it's stationed direct, right? I'm sorry. This is the degree it was on the new moon, actually, was right here, as this 11 degrees of Libra. And so there's a problem solving that we've had to do as Mercury has been retrograde. And this has been one of the, I wouldn't say easiest Mercury retrogrades. It really depends on how it's influencing you and your chart and all the other aspects surrounding it. But it feels like the lens, turning inward. It's like we've been applying all of this information through our own mental capacity for ourselves, right? To find that peace of mind within ourselves, to apply what we know about, balance and justice and peace, applying it to our own mental sphere in order to be prepared when it does station direct, to be then able to apply that back out into a social context that is out there. So this has been an important time. And if it's been difficult, I feel like it's because there's just been a lot that had to be reviewed. And there a lot of renegotiation within ourselves, an opportunity to really see things. It's when we're challenged, that provides those opportunities. So if it's been a difficult retrograde outside of the normal, electronics going haywire and all this other stuff, if it's really been difficult, and you feel like that your mind has been literally going backwards or things don't seem to be moving, it's because that the application of what we know about balance and fairness and justice is really meant to be turned inwards for us. And so this particular degree is about how do we deal, and this is important because of where it's going to be connected to today, which is in a quincunx to Pallas Athena, which is over here in Pisces. So both of these are retrograde as well. So this degree is about the problem solving we need to initiate in order to take a vast amount of knowledge that we've accumulated and then actually be able to transmit or instruct those who are just now coming into a relationship or an awareness of the beginning of that information, right? So this is why, and this was the degree of Mercury at the new moon, because the ability to be able to relax enough in order to allow this very large body of information and knowledge to be transmitted to a new group, a new cycle. We've had to go back over it, and be aware of how we are doing that for ourselves. That way we can take that process and then apply it back out, right? So And this is, again, part of finding our stillness and our relaxation, because it's like if everything's tense, and we talked about this earlier too, about at the beginning of the lunar cycle, about the leaky pipes or the structural framework and integrity of your channels of communication and your channels of information, that if the structural integrity is not there, if there's something wrong, and this is what Mercury retrograde has been allowing us to do, is to make sure and to address those places where there are leaks, right? Like my dad, for instance, he's got an air leak in his lung, which causes it to keep collapsing, because the surgery that he originally had, they messed it up when they put him back together. And so it is still healing. And so there's little bits of air leaking out, which will not allow his lung to expand, right? Because the pressure is not, where it needs to be, because there's still air leaking. So it's the same idea, right? We've had to go back over that territory and make sure that there are no leaks, right? That the channels of communication and information flow are able to hold what is going to come through, and our ability to stay relaxed. If everything's tight and tense, right, and you come to this bottleneck that where information needs to go through, if it's bound up in any way, or if there's an obstruction, or if the pressure is not there, it won't work. And so this retrograde time has been very important to address this. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this quincunx is, you don't see it on this chart, obviously, but it's over here at 11 degrees of Pisces, Pallas Athena, the goddess of strategy, wisdom, and strategy in war, right? Remember, we're in an information war. We're definitely in a war of consciousness. It might not be physical, violent, war, although it is in a lot of ways. Absolutely. It's very much expressing itself in the physical, but we also want to acknowledge that there's also a battle for our very souls and for our consciousness. And so you can apply that, that perspective to Pallas Athena, and what kind of strategies that we're employing and what kind of wisdom we want to bring to the table. And since they're both retrograde, again, it's much more of an internalized process. Now the quincunx, right, at that 150 degree angle, that square peg in a round hole, or round peg in a square hole, that gives us an opportunity to not only adjust ourselves, but the mastery level here is the alchemical transmutation that it represents. The degree that Pallas Athena is in right now is traveling the narrow path. It's the eye of the needle, right? And so we can acknowledge that on some level that we have to employ some sort of internalized strategy that allows us to find the eye, to move through the eye of the needle, to travel the narrow pathway. And at the same time, if the pathway of information is very narrow, but we have a huge amount of it, how are we going to transmit it? How are we going to express it, communicate it, and instruct it, apply it in terms of knowledge? So remember, we're talking about Libra is knowledge, cardinal air, but Pisces is mutable water. It is traveling the spiritual path, the transcendent path, and it is very narrow. So how do we adjust in this moment, right? When we're traveling a narrow spiritual path, right? It is very narrow. It is through the eye of the needle, and there's only one direction, and we have to actually take a step and go there in order to seek our illumination. How do we adjust ourselves? Well, that's an interesting question, because if the path, it feels to me that it is the narrow path of our own soul, but the material aspect that the square represents, that's surrounding it, is the application of that knowledge into, we're traveling the narrow path, but the application of what we're discovering. And in that process, I think, is really going to be how we adjust ourselves, and seeing that just, we're traveling the narrow path, and so are other people, but we have to be able, how are we going to transmit and instruct and apply all of this knowledge that we are accumulating as we go through this narrow path and, dissolve and ourselves into the formless experience and then bring it back and then actually be able to communicate it. That's very difficult, but this will be the adjustment that comes from that is going to be very enlightening, right? It'll give us, once we're able to figure that out, right, whatever that means for us, it'll make more sense. How do we do that, right? Because there's so much a huge body of information that we've accumulated over a long time, and our ability we have to relax all of the muscles. We have to relax. Even though the path is narrow, we have to relax it so that it can move through safely without actually damaging anything. I think this is going to be really interesting. A really interesting end to today. So as we go into Saturday, the 16th, this is when the moon now has moved into Pisces. This is where we're gonna start talking about Antares in terms of, here is Venus in conjunction with Antares at this point in Sagittarius, the heart of the Scorpion, right? So in the constellation of Scorpio, this is where Antares is, the fixed star Antares. So the star seeds from Antares, they're also very rare. They don't often come into material, they don't incarnate very often because it's very difficult to have access to this depth of information and knowledge and truth, right? The heart of the Scorpion stings, right? But the heart of it is like you're getting to the center of what it is that brings us all together and what we create together. And the drive and the yearning and the hunger to come together is a big part of Scorpio as well. And the feeling, right? That's the urge and the feeling of Scorpio that brings us together. With Venus here, let's just get into the transits first. Let's start there, because then we can kind of expand on that. Because right away, Venus comes into a square with Pallas Athena, right? As she comes into her, there we go, 10 to 11 degree mark. And you're going to see here that, let's see what's going on today. That also means that the moon is going to be in a square to Venus as well on Saturday. So now that the moon is in Pisces, now we're going to start getting direct experience with the feels, not only our feels, but everybody else's feels around us, right? Pisces allows us to connect into that watery, dreamy state. It's very translucent, and it's very boundaryless and formless, and there's a lot of magic here, right? And inspiration. The muse comes in with moon and Pisces like this, direct experience, but it also can be very disempowering. It can feel like we are a victim if we don't realize the difference between ourselves and others, right? Because it's very difficult to do this with the moon in, where are we? There we go. With the moon in Pisces. So, okay. Here we go. The moon is going to first square, before this even happens, let's go back a couple hours. The moon's going to square her own nodal axis, right? And so as the moon has come into Pisces, wow. Okay, well, you see where the square is, right? So here's the nodal axis, 2 to 3 degrees, 2 to 3 degrees in Sagittarius. We've talked about this, a bunch of times, which is the 3 is that first structural foundational connection between the two opposing viewpoints or the two opposing poles of any of the signs. And so with the North Node or Rahu taking us in that direction, we certainly are dealing with very crystallized and formalized intellectual empirical knowledge, right? It's just the knowledge coming together into some sort of form that is very balanced and is very harmonious, right? That 3 is a harmonious structure, representing, the two aspects coming together in Gemini is really just formalism, right? An intellectual crystallization of some mental process, right? You have the one, you have the two, right? The Gemini twins, you have the thesis and antithesis, and the three is just very much the midpoint of that, right? You can even look at it as the Hegelian dialectic in a very pure form, problem, reaction, solution, okay? Without anything else attached to it, right? It's just ideas at this point. It's just ideas and knowledge and information in Gemini. It's in Sagittarius that it is the action of the conflict itself that we are focusing on, which is also where we're coming away from because it's the south node. So the moon in a square, so it's a T-square, right? So the moon will be the square to both of these positions in an opposition. And what does that mean? That T-square is going to help relieve or help us harness the tension of an opposition. And there is, in 3 degrees of Pisces, the Sabian symbol is a petrified forest. It's the idea that nothing is destroyed. And even if the destruction of the physical remnants of a past civilization have made it virtually impossible to have any kind of physical evidence, the three degrees of Pisces represents the fact that nothing is ever truly destroyed. And even an energetic signature or something like petrified wood will exist. And it's not in its entirety, but it does represent that there is some sort of record somewhere in the morphogenetic field, in the Akash, somewhere that represents a civilization past, something of the collective that is no longer with us. And so it's very feeling based. And with the moon specifically, it's really feeling based and it's really in our subconscious. And the moon's getting brighter, right? We're in our second quarter. We're in our waxing gibbous. We are getting close to the full moon. So we're going to have a lot of really bright and very full, emotional and feeling based connections to what has been, even though there's no physical evidence necessary or it's not in its full structural integrity. It's still petrified. Petrified wood is the idea that something organic has been fossilized. Because wood is just going to degrade because it's organic and it decomposes just like everything else. But when it's petrified, it means it's fossilized. So there's something in the morphogenetic field. There's something in the Akash that we have a direct access to that will allow us to really release the tension between these two aspects of mind and higher mind that is very connected to our karmic trajectory in terms of where we've been and where we're going. And I feel like that even though the moon is squaring both of these positions in a T-square, I think it's going to allow us to see, to really tap into what has been in the past. And it doesn't even have to go that far into the past, right? It really doesn't, it can still be part of our current human civilization, but just a past cycle. And it's something that we're going to be able to connect in directly with that will help us relieve the tension of this natural and pervasive tension of the nodal axis of where we've been and where we're going, because the tendency is to really hang on to the tail of where we've been because it's familiar territory, and even facing that way, being like, that's where I'm coming from. That's what I'm familiar with, right? And in this case, it's Sagittarius, the ritualization of the conflict in order to create something new. This is where the Hegelian dialectic actually gets used. The problem, reaction, and the solution. The problem and the reaction are the two poles that are synthesized and brought forward. But it's about action, right? Because it's Sagittarius, it's fire. But that's something, that's where we've been. And so there's a tendency to keep facing that direction. But we want to be facing the direction of Rahu or the North Node, of the dragon pulling us in this direction in order for our soul to learn and to evolve. And we're getting to the end of Gemini. So, I mean, the mental sphere here is soon to end. And we are going to get into all feeling when the nodes eventually shift into Taurus and Scorpio. And we will get a nice preview of that with the lunar eclipse in November. But this square, I mean, this moment here is about connecting into what has been in terms of the field, right? To have a direct connection into what has already transpired and finding those artifacts, whether they be physical, whether they be emotional, whether they be psychic or intuitive, in the records, right? Whatever kind of records that we are able to access, there's something here that we're able to connect into and be like, oh, this is a record of what has been. And this seems to actually connect back into, I mean, you can see that Mercury and Chiron are in an opposition today as well. So this seems, it feels connected to me because, again, the tendency here with Chiron and Aries is to, right now at least, is to have each of our individual ego experiences to be centralized as like the experience. It's all about me. It's all about my ego kind of ruling everything. And feeling either guilty about that or using that as a way to like step into some sort of savior complex. And within ourselves, it really is about our ego stepping in to save us in some way. So there does feel like a connection here to not only with Mercury retrograde in terms of the challenge of being able to instruct or release a huge body of knowledge, but it also, we're going to have a direct connection into the huge body of knowledge from the past, some past cycle, whatever it is. And it could be ancestral, but, with Pisces, we are talking about the collective unconscious here. And feeling, right? That's where the square really comes in with this mutable square. It's because this is about the mind. And Pisces is all about the feels, And the moon in Pisces, it's really all about the feels. So the tendency, again, is to want to do all of this in our mind. And our mind is amazing. But we're getting prepared now to start to, in the next couple of months, really come into the feels, either in a material way or with Scorpio in a very deep, watery, dark way, the truth, and secrets and power dynamics. So that square is very interesting. So like I said, we're going to also come into Venus is going to trine Chiron, and then we also know that Mercury is already in an opposition to Chiron as well. So we have these two Chiron connections as well today. So yesterday into today. So we have well, this is not exact, but it's coming in pretty close. So let's talk about the trine from Venus, actually, Venus to Chiron, because that seems to be more relevant exactly to Saturday, which is tomorrow. So you can see there it is. It comes into an exact trine. So Venus in conjunction with Antares. So the Antares starseeds, right? They don't come into form very often because it's very difficult to incarnate when you have access to the very heart of the depth of our power. But it's very, I don't want to say maternal. It's feminine. It's the divine feminine. It's like the Kali energy of the divine feminine, though, because we're talking about Scorpio. It is the sting of the depth of our power dynamics and the communion, right? And specifically the communion and the faith that goes along with Scorpio, because that's where you really discover those things, is in Scorpio. So Venus is our connection to the material world, our sensitivity to the material world, and bringing to us what it is we desire and what allows us to feel good, right? So when she's connected here to Antares like this is very uncomfortable, I think, but also too very powerful, like being able to have direct access in a very physical and sensitive way to the heart of the Scorpion into Antares is very healing, even if it's very it's like, are you going to succumb to the sting, or are you going to allow it to be like this homeopathic remedy that is going to actually reinforce your faith in our power to create something, in something substantial? But it's still, we will still have direct experience in who and what we value through our resources in terms of this sting, right? Of what that means. So the trine to Chiron is kind of an awesome moment, because it is about going back into the body, right? Because Sagittarius is about the higher mind, but it does reinforce the need to go back into the body and to be able to use the body as a means of being able to pick up on things, right? You can't just intellectualize everything. And so we come back into the body, and even if it's uncomfortable or painful, we take the heart of the scorpion. We allow it to be a potent medicine, just like the rattlesnake and the spider, right? Those things represent the poison that can act as a homeopathic remedy, and the ability to actually strengthen and deepen our faith. So this trine to Chiron, that is, of course, poking at those wounds of guilt and shame, and reinforcing us to really encapsulate and like pull ourselves in at an ego level, and making it really just like, my ego is going to rule everything about this situation. Either to, again, the savior complex, or to reinforce that, that victim status, without actually healing from the very thing that is leading to our suffering to begin with. There is something very healing about this, that we can really plug into if we have the capacity and the bravery, which is Mars here in Libra, the bravery and the courage to really move towards a balance and fairness and peace of mind in our relationships. But there's something so much deeper here, and it will require that we actually feel into it, that we don't over intellectualize it in this moment. And the Antarian starseeds that are present, they really know what's up. They have the access to the heart of the scorpion, and that depends on where it's at in your chart, how this manifests itself. But the Antarian nature. Now, Antares is a stargate to Andromeda, so put a pin in that right now, because that's going to be relevant when we come to the full moon, which is going to be in conjunction with the Andromeda galaxy, and what that means. Because if you want to express yourself and your feelings around being totally free and independent and being completely yourself in any given moment, you have to also be able to eventually touch into what that means at a collective level, and how that impacts everybody around you. So again, put a pin in that. We'll come back to that. But this trine is a moment here, because we are talking about Aries with Chiron, by the way. So, and that's where the full moon will be, is in Aries. So this whole idea of the individual subjective experience, the ego being the real agent of Aries, the spark that has us move out and forward into the actualization of self. All of these things are Aries related. And Chiron there has been really messing with us in that way. It's been an interesting journey. Okay, let's see here. So yeah, this Antares, Venus meeting Antares in a trine here to Chiron tomorrow is a healing opportunity if we have the capacity to really feel into the sting, whatever it is, right? And remember, when Venus is in the sign of Scorpio, is also very it's not very fun, is it? And we've discovered that over the course of her transit through Scorpio, how uncomfortable it was, how much we had to touch into the depth of those things, and the tendency to want to surround ourselves with intoxicating delusions. And now we have to see what that actually will start creating if we have done that. And so this is going to be the sting of that, big time. Again, healing moment though, right? So don't be too hard on yourself with what comes up, because it's an opportunity to just let it move through you and to see it for what it is, and to attribute it to your own value system, and really heal those wounds of shame and guilt around who you are and your right to just be yourself. That's a big part of this Chiron and Aries too. So let's see here. There's a lot going on tomorrow, to be perfectly honest. Uranus is going to be in an opposition to Vesta over here in Scorpio. And, you know, Uranus, we've talked about it many times, is the disrupting factor and the radical reorientation that triggers transformation and awakening through the material world, and our ability to connect into the natural world and be revitalized by it, to reconnect to that part of ourselves that's kind of unconscious and not really thinking about it, just doing and feeling and being. That when we have disruptions in this way, it actually shifts our perspective enough that we can wake up to a much larger aspect of reality. But in opposition to Vesta, you know, she's the flame at the center, right? The everlasting eternal flame that is what is the fire in our soul, and the fire at the center of a collective soul. And, you know, especially when we're talking about Vesta. And in Scorpio, I mean, she is really showing us that we have to develop new lines of communication with each other, even if they are, if they've been disrupted in one fashion, if we've disrupted them ourselves, if we're having a hard time, like really reaching people or communicating our perspective. This part of Scorpio is showing us the necessity in some ways. In order to keep that flame eternal, we have to build these new lines of communication, you know, build more channels of communication that are not necessarily going to be manipulated or hijacked in any way. But the opposition to Uranus, again, is like, how much, you know, while that's happening, there's also this collective energy of the collective there, you know, this energy, the collective awakening process that Uranus represents, is again bringing us back into just being at one with nature, right? Just being, right? Just being and revitalizing ourselves, and not pushing so hard and not trying to make anything happen, just being with the world and just being with nature in order to really revitalize ourselves. And so there's this sense here that we have to actually do something over here in terms of establishing new communications, and it's important, but also too that we are challenged to not try so hard and to actually just plug into the planet herself, and that will in fact infuse us and allow us to naturally connect to each other and to the planet. So that opposition is going to be something we're going to have to find the midpoint of, right? It's not all about yes, it's important for the sustaining of the community or the collective itself that we establish these new connections, but it's also just as important for us to travel through this wormhole together that Uranus really represents, that we connect to the planet. We have to connect into the planet. It's not all going to be, and this is going to be part of the nodal axis shifting into Taurus and Scorpio in general, okay? These themes are being presented to us in different ways right now so that we can actually work on it and feel it and integrate it into who we are, so that when we come into a much more a karmic soul journey that we are really being propelled towards, that we know what it feels like already. And again, the lunar eclipse in November is going to set the stage for that and will reverberate over the course of the next 6 months. And so when we reach that point again with the nodal axis crossing those same points as the full moon lunar eclipse, we're going to have like a time, it's going to be like a time echo in some ways. So just, you know, what's happening now is going to come back around later. And so all of these things are really they're incredible opportunities for us to harness what's happening. But it's not all in it's not all in those deep feels emotionally. We have to literally connect into the planet as a living being in order to also be revitalized and to also find our awakening, and have the capacity to hold energy. That's the thing about Uranus and the Aquarian archetype. It's the water bearer is holding the energy in order for the capacity to hold it, right? We need the capacity to hold this higher voltage that's going to come in. So, and part of that is actually establishing new lines of communication with each other, but it's not the only thing, right? We literally have to get back in touch with the physical planet as well. So then the moon is also, as you see here, comes into a square with Venus, and actually in this position makes a number of connections. It's in a square to Venus. It meets Pallas Athena, right? We talked about that in terms of today's astrology, where it's the narrow path. It's in a square to Venus in conjunction with Antares, right? The meeting, reconnection to the body, going back to the body for information, and then also a quincunx to Mercury, just like Pallas Athena. So these themes today with Mercury and Pallas Athena in terms of the narrow path, and then how do you actually move past the narrow, how do you push through the narrow path in terms of your application of knowledge and wisdom? Well, that's just going to come up to the surface even more when the moon meets Pallas Athena. So we'll have this really direct connection, and this capacity to feel into, because there's no boundaries, there's no senses that you can necessarily use in Pisces. You really have to use your feeling in order to figure out where this pathway is. You have to use your own intuition and your own ability to connect into the field, or the Akash, or your intuition mostly. And with the moon here at this position, it's really going to heighten that a lot. The square is, again, the square is going to be the challenge, because in terms of physical reality and our relationships, our resources, the things that we interact with in 3D here, that Venus does represent, because it's about our security and our comfort and value, right? She represents what we value. Connecting into the heart of the Scorpion around these themes is really going to cause some friction here with our more deeply intuitive and feeling based, trying to find the middle path, because this will be very distracting and painful, and it's almost overwhelming to go back into the body and the value of everything and just feel it, right? It's going to be a lot. I think it's going to be a lot. And so again, there's that quincunx with Mercury in Libra in retrograde. So the moon, the good thing about this, it's the squares and the oppositions and the quincunxes where we learn so much more. It's where we grow so much more. So even though this square and this quincunx is going to be probably very challenging, I also feel like that with the moon meeting Pallas Athena, we get the direct strategy, as a direct, a direct osmosis. That's the word I was looking for. Right to us, right? It's like we will. The strategy is to find the pathway, the very narrow pathway, to walk the path of illumination that's through the eye of the needle. And when the moon meets Pallas Athena, it's like osmosis. We'll just know, right? We'll just know what to do. Even in the face of these really difficult connections with Venus and Mercury, that's going to be like, wait a minute, but what about what's going on up here? This is so painful, and at the depth of things, I don't know if I can handle the sting of what this means. And Mercury being like, how am I supposed to apply everything about, this entire situation to those who need the instruction? And right now it's still instruction within us, right? So just apply that instruction to yourself. It's going to be very interesting, but osmosis, right? Direct knowing when the moon meets Pallas Athena in this point. And it's going to be the connection to everything else that's going to reinforce it, right? Because you'll feel the tension and you'll be like, oh, this doesn't feel good. But you'll be like, but I know this is the path. And I'm already feeling that about some other things right now in my life, that I'm just like, I'm starting to get inklings that there's something I need to do. And I'm just like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to do that. But I'm getting the, I'm getting the kind of like, you're going to have to do that. It's very subtle right now, but it's annoying, but it is what it is, right? And so we have to trust that as well. Sometimes we have to do things that our ego doesn't want necessarily to do, but we know that it's actually part of what we should be doing. So that's kind of the general theme here. And then the Mars is going to also come into a quincunx. Now you see now that Neptune's moved into its next degree of Pisces. So Mars is coming into a quincunx with that as well. And so now with Neptune, we've gone from this place where we've been receiving like these direct mandates from the top, right? Whatever that means to us. It really depends on where your devotion and your worship and your bhakti really is going, right? Who is the beloved that you worship? And that's going to make a big difference about what mandates you're going to put into your everyday life. But now Neptune has retrograded back into the next degree. And now it's getting to more of, we're addressing within us, right? And Neptune's dissolving everything away. And it's really dissolving everything away to the point where we have to just trust almost like a tactile sensation of the future, of where we're going, and that we're like little children. We're like petting the lamb, right? And the lamb is soft and it feels good, and it feels good to us to pet the lamb, and the lamb likes to be pet. You know what I mean? There's a lot of symbolism here, by the way, with the lamb and the beginning of spring and Christianity, for instance. But it's the idea, and there's a sense of being watched over, like we're not completely alone, but there's an innocence here, and it's not and it's almost naive, but it's naive because it's an innocent, like, everything's going to be okay, and the only thing I have to go on is my feeling that everything's going to be okay, and that I am participating in this process in a way that's hopeful, right? And I have nothing else to go on. So again, the quincunx to Mars right now in Libra at this degree is this idea here that Mars in Libra, is just like putting all of his warrior energy towards like I am going to make sure that everything is balanced and fair, and it's very diplomatic, right? Mars is at its detriment in Libra, so it's not really hot and fiery and warrior like. It's much more of a diplomat and like putting that actualization energy into the social context, and it's driving us to again want to go towards the ocean, want to go towards, but not submerge ourselves into it. Everybody go towards it. Everybody go kind of commune around it. Everybody goes to the beach for the day and is reinfusing themselves with this energy in their own way, but we're all kind of together, and that's how we actually find peace of mind and balance in our social context. Neptune in Pisces in this quincunx is just like, we're not going to the ocean. We're all just completely dissolved into it. And we have nothing but our own very innocent and almost naive intuition that it's going to be okay. Where Mars is just like, no, let's all go, right? This is the thing we all need to do. I'm going to like initiate it for myself and everyone else. Let's go to the ocean. Let's go to the ocean and be right, and connect to it. Whereas Neptune's like, I'm going to push you in now. We're all getting pushed in, and everything around us being dissolved. So there's nothing. We're just like floating like bobbers out in the ocean with that. So again, we're going and Mars is our ego, right? Mars is the divine masculine, the penetrating, thrusting, moving forward, actualizing the self, pushing forward. We're going to have to adjust ourselves because there's nowhere to push when you're just out in the middle of the ocean, right? Where you're just like, okay, I'm just going to have to like, melt into this situation. So that is also going to be quite a challenge, but also an opportunity to really masterfully transmute that energy, because it's not as if there's nowhere to go. It's just that they seemingly don't fit together until we actually do the work to make them fit together. This is the divine intervention. This is the fall that allows for like I said, the divine intervention. The fall of the 7 is where we surrender in some ways to something that is more than just us, but it will take our a willingness to be open to the adjustment in this way. So, man, there's so much happening on Saturday, because then Mercury is in a sextile to Venus. So you can see how these two are going to influence each other, how they're going to support each other. There's going to be a reconciling of these opposites in a harmonious way, where we are being feeling into not only the sting of the Scorpio in our relationships, but really in our not in our minds at all, but in our experience. And this will, I think, applied this to Mercury retrograde, it will allow us that sextile. It's going to be very informative. There's going to be something there as Mercury is still in its retrograde that's going to allow us to harmonize and to create something new, or at the very least harmonize and give us access to all directions to go in terms of how we are going to take this full body of knowledge and instruct our own selves, that a part of ourselves that's still learning and is new, right? It's still retrograde, so we're still working on ourselves. This is going to be very informative. This is by, like you can see here, by the end of Saturday, this sextile right here. So on the one hand, we're dealing with these very large, with the moon in Pisces, we're feeling into all of it, everything that ever was and ever will be, the entire ocean of consciousness that we're going to be feeling into over the weekend. Whereas Venus and Mercury and the Sun and Mars, they're all much more oriented to something that's palpable, and at least something that is action oriented, right? These are air and fire, right? There's something that we do with these things with Libra and Sagittarius. So, and then the moon comes into, right at the same time. Yeah, the moon is in, look at this, is in a sextile to Uranus. So here's another reconciliation of opposite energies and another opportunity to harmonize and then have every direction in which to go. And 14, this is about the necessity for protecting yourself. When we are in Pisces, that means that we are just as accessible to everything else as everything else is accessible to us. So when we find this sextile here, especially this degree, 14 degrees of Pisces, this is about the use of our mental subtlety and our intellect in order to shield us and protect us, right? There's something about being clever like a fox that is surrounding us in this way that will allow us to really not only be able to develop those lines of communication, it's going to keep us insulated in some ways, right? And whatever that is for us, that's something that we have to figure out on our own. But there will be this sense that we can use our cleverness, our mental subtlety, our own intellect in some ways to shield us and protect us from that which is, that we are submerged into. And that will, again, we can invest that, and we can invest where Uranus is at the same time, right? Be able to connect into the planet, being able to connect directly into the grid of the planet, very physically and energetically, that will, I think, allow us to be, it'll allow, how do I say this? there's like an insulation there. It's like our toroidal field. If you connect in to the planet and you allow that to infuse your field, right, then your field gets bigger, it gets brighter, it gets stronger. And then what happens? It does not allow in that which would otherwise, violate your boundaries. You know what I mean? So we have to invest that energy into each other, because we don't want to fully shield ourselves so much that we don't allow anything in. And part of this is that trine to Vesta over here with establishing the new connections. There is that those connections will in fact provide some level of insulation by being connected to those people that are on the same page as us, that have the same goals as we do, that have the same end goal that our cooperation can create. If we can do that, I feel like that will allow for us to, and at the same time, we invest this energy of Uranus, we connect into the planet and strengthen our field. Those two things are going to allow us to be protected from that which may be trying to encroach on our energetic space. And, there's a lot of propaganda that goes along with Pisces, right? So we don't want to, and we don't want to leave ourselves open to being influenced that way. So that's something to consider as well by the end of Saturday, because that's especially in the dream state, my friends, especially in the dream state. So let's move on to Sunday. I'm going to check in with the chat here. Emily says, it feels like it's a perfect time to sharpen our tools. Boy, oh boy, you said it. And discernment better be one of your tools. That's for sure, because we're going to need it. I mean, there's no stopping what's happening, regardless of whose agenda is they're all unfolding and nobody's slowing down. So discernment is going to be very important in terms of staying on your trajectory here. Where are we at here? So our moon is still in... Sorry, guys, there's just so many windows open. Now, the moon is still in Pisces. Now, as we see, as of noon on Sunday, the 17th, the moon and Neptune come together. So even leading up to that overnight, your dreams, every time the moon and the Neptune come together in Pisces like this, for how many years that Neptune's been in Pisces, it's just every month when it comes around, it's just like you have direct access, and it's so potent and it's so palpable, right? Like you have direct connection to the what is in your own subconscious, what is in the collective unconscious that's coming through your own vessel. So that's something to consider, how powerful that's going to be. And again, it's going to be in this very naive, and not naive in a bad way, like just this very innocent, like there's nothing else to go on at this point, because Neptune's just dissolving it all, like nothing except our own sense of hope and our own sense of what, the positive of what could be. And we reinforce that by engaging in activities that bring that feeling about, whatever that is. And that's really symbolized in the Sabian symbols, at least, of the little girl petting the lamb, right? Like just the feeling, the very tactile sensation that everything is going to be fine, and that it's very innocent and it's not naive. I wish I could find the better word for this right now, but certainly very, very childlike in that way. Just to give ourselves over to the hope of what could be, and to reinforce that by doing actual things that give us that same feeling, right? So when the moon comes around, plenty of opportunities in this moment to have direct connection to that feeling, because nothing else will be there for us to connect to necessarily. Now, of course, that means also too that the moon will then pass Neptune and come into a quincunx with Mars, who was just in that connection with Neptune the day before. And so it just reinforces it, but makes it a lot more personal in that moment of this need to adjust ourselves between the social order, the material aspect of the social order, like the actual use of our knowledge to find balance in the social order, versus the entirety of the experience of reality and the field of consciousness that Pisces represents. So it's just going to come back around and like reinforce it in a very personal way on Sunday. What else is happening? Okay. So Venus then comes into we talked about this, the square to Pallas Athena. We already talked about that. And this is where the sun is now in a conjunction with Arcturus. And what is it going to do? It's going to square Pluto. Pluto that is now direct, okay? So now, number one, we have the sun in Arcturus in conjunction with Arcturus. This is where Mercury stationed retrograde. Remember, we talked about this because there was a huge earthquake in Greece, on Crete, on this very day. And I did a whole thing about Arcturus and the constellation that was in, and its reference to ancient Greek history and mythology. So I will link that in this video at the end. So if you want to go back and listen to that, or if you haven't heard it yet, then you'll have access to that. But Arcturus, right? The Arcturian star scenes, this is, access to very deep wisdom, the keys to the universe, and being able to see through all of the events of life unfolding to see the larger picture of it, right? You see death, right? You see the evidence of death, right? Like in an autumn leaf, for instance, and it's through, you see through it to the much bigger process that is unfolding, which is ultimately what we're experiencing with Libra, right? Because it is this dynamic process of balance in order to find peace and justice, but it also represents balance in the universe and how we apply our knowledge of balance in order to live within a balanced construct, whatever that is, a relationship or some sort of social order or community. So the sun, we will find ourselves really expressing ourselves through this Arcturian nature, right, of deep wisdom and teaching and transmission of knowledge, that is very much connected to the Mercury at this bottleneck of like, how do I actually do it? It's so much. I've spent all this time learning, and now I have to somehow transmit it back to myself, those parts of myself that are still learning. But with the sun and Arcturus, it's very much like shining through the full knowledge of what that is, the full wisdom of what it means to be in balance. And so the square to Pluto, now direct, is the fact that we may be expressing and finding ourselves through the awareness of the full picture of living in this universe and how to find balance in it. But the square comes from the very real and very raw and very authentic, powerful experience of destruction at a institutional and matrix level, right? Our entire society crumbling around us right now, and Pluto now moving direct. The engine is turned on and it's starting to move up to full speed. And this square is really going to highlight the very real challenge and friction with being a person and an individual person and expressing ourselves through the knowledge and the knowing and the realization of the full picture of how we live in a balanced state, right? Which is, again, this is a big part of this whole new moon cycle, and having to be at cross purposes with the very real power of creation that starts with destruction, right? This is very raw. So by Sunday, this is going to come to a head. And so everything leading up to this point over the weekend is getting us ready to come to this one particular square, I think. Because once Jupiter and Mercury station direct on the 18th, this is when, all systems start really turning on, especially the mind, right? And communication and the movement of information. That's going to start turning on as well. and projecting outwards. So this square on Sunday, no joke, Arcturian starseeds, this is, this is really important for those of us who have this, because this is going to be where we find ourselves. You're going to really feel yourself, really feel like yourself, and really express yourself through this very familiar signature. And setting some example, holding space, and really being yourself in this moment while everything seems to be crumbling all around and underneath us. So it's going to be important that we really connect to the bigger picture of what is being the space that's being created as a result of the destruction that's very real and very palpable. And it's not really fair to this is where compassion comes in. It's not really fair, I would say, my personal opinion, to invalidate the very real experience people are having of their reality shattering around them. So if you are an Arcturian starseed, or you identify with Arcturus in some way in terms of your mission, like if you're a light worker, or you're not Arcturian starseed, but you're still a starseed, just, remember here that the whole purpose of identifying with this is not to be like, I know what's coming and you shouldn't be upset about what's happening. It's to very much hold the resonance of the full picture, so that and express ourselves through it, so that it provides a light and a sense of centralizing power in the face of very real destructive experiences. Then, like I said, the moon will conjunct Neptune. We already went through that. And then the moon will sextile Pluto, actually. So when we talk about that, you can see here. And this is the way that this is going to this square is going to be really intense, okay? So the way that this is going to work in our favor, this sextile, this degree, number one, this is my south node. So I know this very well. And I know somebody else that this is their north node. So they know this very well too. This particular degree is the catharsis that our soul initiates in order to purify all of these perversions and corrupting influences within the whole collective unconscious. So this is going to be really hard, but this is going to allow us to connect very intuitively, personally, emotionally, in our feelings, to the opportunity that this destruction is actually providing, right? Catharsis, right? Catharsis, that it leads to purification of ourselves at a subconscious level. And we're getting so close to the full moon. It's going to be so bright at this point that we're not going to have any choice but to have full experience of this. So keep that in mind as well. For as much as this is going to be very difficult by the end of Sunday, what we're going to find here is the opportunity and the reconciliation that can happen that will lead us into all new the opportunity to go in any direction is provided to us with this sextile. And it is very much about how Pluto will provide, and this square in particular is going to provide some measure of catharsis. Of course, there's a quincunx, right? With the sun, same thing. We're going to be feeling the catharsis and the purification at a soul level, and it's not going to seem to fit with where we really want to express ourselves in this very wise and very balanced perspective of the whole thing, because this is very much in the throes of the feeling. So by the end of Sunday, we're really going to start feeling it and experiencing it, because boom, here we go. This is when station direct. And then by the end of the day, station direct, right? Mercury and Jupiter station direct. So let's just take a moment here to look at what's going to happen. So we also see that Mars is in a trine to Jupiter now direct in conjunction with Spica, right? And so Mars is Mars will be that initiatory forward momentum thrusting out of our resources in order to provide and to give and to be a source of sustenance for people, whatever it is that we have to offer. Mars is going to be pushing it outwards, certainly it's going to be encouraging us to push it outwards. Now that Jupiter is direct, this is going to be like the resources are literally going to be pushed outwards, right? Into the collective experience, into the energy of the community or collective that we find ourselves in, right? Aquarius. And now that it's direct and Mars is moving outwards, right? And so all of these resources that we've accumulated now are going to get pushed out, right? We're going to be able to apply them in a very direct way, which is very important to consider, right? Especially based on everything that's going to happen over the weekend, like getting us kind of up to speed and having all these really uncomfortable experiences, having to touch into the heart of the Scorpion, right in our own bodies, into what we value, really questioning some things, really having to go into that space. And now the moon is in Aries, right? And also about to meet Chiron. Right? We see that the moon meets Chiron in that changeover period from Monday the 18th into the 19th. So now the moon is in Aries, it's meeting Chiron. Now the Chiron is in a completely new degree as well, and it's retrograde. And this is about, we're going to be provided, this is, the game is about to change, right? And certainly many of us have been expecting it. And I think if we've been complacent or if we've kind of started doubting that things are going to happen, this will be like, whoa, what's happening come next week and into the full moon. But the moon meeting Chiron, direct connection into the feelings of our wounding and our shame and our guilt. And it's okay to look at some sort of symbolic representation and allow for a new meaning to come forward from it. We don't have to stay with the same meaning of the symbols that we have been interacting with maybe this whole time. It's totally fine, right? It doesn't mean that we're any less. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with us. We've all been deceived on some level. We've all been operating under a framework of deception for so long. And this particular degree of Aries is about giving new meaning to symbols, right? New meaning to symbols that we have been using. It's within us, right? And so the moon's going to meet this point and really give us an opportunity to be like, oh, maybe I can interact with this symbol in a new way. Take it back. You know what I mean? And it'll be something. The degree is a teacher gives new meaning to traditional images, right? It depends on who your teacher is as well. But there's going to be a shifting in the meaning of these symbolic representations. Something is going to be shifting and changing, and it will trigger people, especially with the moon here, especially with the moon in Aries, right? Triggering tempers and flaring and inflammation and in our bodies and in our feelings, right? It could really bring some stuff up. Just let it come through you, because it's an opportunity in this moment to be like, I never looked at it this way before. And it's okay. A lot of people are going to really struggle with this and get angry because they don't want to realize, they don't want to come to terms with the fact that maybe all of the energy they've been putting into some sort of symbol actually was for infusing it with something else than they had intended. And I think people are going to be really angry about this. And it's going to be a real struggle. And you can see that Mercury never quite got into a direct opposition with Chiron before it stationed direct. So that is interesting as well. We didn't quite get that direct opposition, like that really intense pull either way. But it got pretty close. I'd say it was close enough to make an impact. Now, some explosiveness coming from the 18th into the 19th. And it is technically in opposition to Mercury, just not totally exact. Venus is going to come into a quincunx with Uranus. And as we are really trying to, again, this is about like connecting into a body of spiritual information and wisdom that is so much deeper than what we thought existed. And it does require a certain amount of like connecting to that. And again, the quincunx will be like, well, it's not just about where we've come from in terms of humans. That's important, and we're gonna go into that. But the adjustment comes from the even more deep and the more basic connection to the planet itself, and not so much about the civilizations that came before, right? Or the achievements of it, the knowledge that came from it, right? Like, you know, antediluvian, for instance, right? Pre-flood, for instance, beyond what we identify as the beginning of our civilization, of human civilization, right? Connecting to something much deeper, right? And this will require, again, an adjustment. It will, in fact, could represent a fall from grace in some ways, or a fall from what we thought was our beginnings, in order to allow in some sort of divine intervention, or to adjust ourselves in the moment. Again, there's going to be, it's all about connecting back into the actual physical planet, into the energetics of the material world, as much as it is maybe getting to the real root of our history. That's, again, going to come through in what we value, what makes us feel good, comfortable, our relationships, our currency, our sensitivity to the world around us, as well. And so Sagittarius is about the collective paradigm too. So it really has a lot to do with what paradigm you're operating under as well, that will influence your experience of where Venus is on the 19th. So the full moon, here's the full moon on the 20th. And this is, first of all, before we get to the full moon, we're going to find here, number one, that the moon in Aries is going to square Pluto in Capricorn. Not only is it in Aries, it is in conjunction with Eris, the dwarf planet Eris, that's even further out than Pluto, right? The goddess of chaos. So the moon's going to meet Eris at this degree that is representing existing in two places at once, right? The ability to do so, again, in a square to Pluto that almost forces you into total presence, because it's so powerful and it's so raw with what's happening and being destroyed, that you have no choice almost to be in the experience of it. And so the square here is really going to challenge. There's going to be some chaos, that's for sure, and we're going to feel the chaos within ourselves. And the real power to harness right now is this ability to exist in both realms at once through the chaos, right? You can exist in the 3D and the 5D at once, within yourself, right? And in your feelings, in this friction that will pull us into a very real, present, physical experience of destruction, in order to make way for what's coming, right? The destruction of the old guard, right? Our society is crumbling right in front of us. However you want to conceptualize it, this is where Pluto and Capricorn is representing right now, especially the nicer things, the beautiful things, the artistic things, all of the things that our culture has developed that allow us to stand on in some ways, and to find some support in. It's like a rug, like a beautiful oriental rug, right? That's just being, thread by thread, is just being pulled out from under us, and we don't even realize it's gone until it's too late. But now that Pluto's moving direct, it's happening a lot faster on the outside of us. So this moment here, it's going to be a real challenge as well. There's a lot of challenge once we hit the weekend. There's no doubt about it. And then by the time we get to, and I'll talk about the full moon last. By the time we get to Thursday, the moon will move into Taurus, which means it's going to square Saturn, and it means it's going to meet Uranus. So also be prepared for some very radical reorientation of how we feel about things also coming. And then you see that there's a yod here, right? The finger of God pointing to this as well, from Venus and Mercury. So that's a lot. So let's talk about the full moon real quick and Andromeda. So Andromeda galaxy beings, and the star seeds in particular, these individuals are coming from a completely different galaxy. They hold the signature of freedom and independence and liberty, because they need to be free at any given moment. So Andromedan star seeds are an interesting bunch of people. They tend to be the flakes. They're very flaky in terms of the star seeds, because time is it's just too much. And so they tend to do things like cancel their plans at the last minute. I know that I definitely have done that many times, because you commit to something at the time and it feels right. And then when the time comes and you're like, this doesn't feel right anymore, you just cancel. You don't even care about feeling obligated. You're just like, I don't want to do this. And then you turn out to be flaky and people don't rely on you. And that has its own set of problems. This is why it's difficult. Andromedan star seeds really have a hard time committing to things on a timeline because of this. But they also are like on the front line of social evolution and revolution, because the freedom and independence aspect of Andromedan starseeds is primary. And so these individuals are really good at pointing out gaslighting, pointing out emotional manipulation, and calling it out, and they just don't put up with it. I mean, bye Felicia is like the mantra, or like the calling card of the Andromedan star seeds, right? They're just like, right? Anything that disrupts the ability to be free fully in any given moment to be oneself is on the chopping block for Andromedan star seeds. But they push social revolution forward, because that is the primary motivation all the time. So this is, in fact, where the moon will be at the full moon, and the sun will be in opposition. And so the sun will be at this. The thing about the Andromedan star seeds and this signature in particular is there's no reliance, there's no focus on the reliance of other people or the community, right? You're not even considering other people or how to transfigure yourself in the face of other people or a social context. That's not even remotely on the menu, right? It's always about being free to be oneself at any given moment. And that is the primary motivation for all activity. So with the sun here in Libra like this, it's the realization with this full moon is that we come to know and express ourselves through this reassurance, or this inner assurance that we are surrounded by each other and a community, either physical or non-physical, right? Angels and guides and source and our community and the people that we are committed to. Because that's the thing about Libra in the 7th house. It represents those we are in a committed relationship with, regardless of what kind of relationship. It's one that you've committed to being a part of. And so we find ourselves and we find our expression at this full moon through this assurance that we are surrounded, that we're supporting each other, others are supporting us, we are a collective together. Now, what it's going to show is very fully in a very Andromedan way is going to show within us. So bringing to the surface subconsciously all of the this group coming together and expressing each individual perspective, our disappointment, to put it lightly, our disappointment with those who have been in a position of power, right? It is and the responsibility that goes along with being in that type of position, right? It is the ability to hold the space. This degree in particular is the ability to hold the space and hold your own in the face of a group coming at you of disappointment. So it's really going to depend on which social context we find ourselves committed to, that this is going to express itself. But there will be a coming to a head of groups of people that are incredibly committed to the revolution within themselves and expressing it very, very boldly. And it coming from this sustainment and this expression through the knowing that we are that this perspective is completely supported, that we're supporting each other, that there's an entire community surrounding us that is going to support our agenda or our what we're doing, right? The social context, the relationship itself. And it's an assurance. It's an assurance. And so there's going to be a lot of boldness. There's going to be a lot of very, 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 I don't want to say rash. It's not rash. It's just going to be a lot of very bold, expressive energy and a lot of coming and a lot of calling out, right? A lot of calling out, a lot of acknowledging where people have, not taken their responsibilities seriously. And it's really about a disappointed group of people calling out leadership and calling out those that they feel are not holding up their end of the bargain or holding up their end of the responsibility. It's going to be very loud. It's going to be very bold. It's going to be very powerful. Now, how that comes forward, I can't necessarily say, but it's certainly going to be loud and expressive. And when we talk about Andromedan starseeds, it's really going to bring that dynamic to the surface in our emotional state, in our feelings, right? In that which represents the intuitive or subconscious nature, which is the moon. So the moon allows us to connect into other fields of experience because it is our intuition and our psychic ability. So we will have, I think a lot of people are, they're going to be angry leading up to this point and for different reasons. And that anger is eventually going to find an expression at this full moon. And it's also going to show what needs to be let go of too. Like maybe that there's been a perspective that you've been holding on to that you finally come to realize, wait a minute, that's not what I thought it was. And then you're really pissed off, right? You can see how this could possibly unfold. Now, be prepared as well for these, full moons are prime time for lots of ritual and to activate all kinds of things. So it's certainly going to be utilized for many different types of agendas. So just keep that in mind as well. But I do feel like it's going to be very bold and it's going to be very focused on a very loud expression of disappointment and calling out, basically, and calling out emotional manipulation, calling out gaslighting, calling out those who have not fulfilled their role in a leadership position. So we will see. We will see how this will come forward, but boy, oh boy, it's going to be intense. So I'm going to check in with the chat real quick here and see the stream is running just fine. So I'm going to leave it there for today. Guys, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. These reports are so jammed-packed full of information. And I guess it wasn't so bad considering I wasn't prepared at all to do this because I'm just coming off of my own whirlwind of reality here. But I do, the cliff notes here is that they're gonna, we're gonna go deep into the feels. We're gonna feel into a lot. We're gonna get a lot of intuitive information, access to our compassion and our forgiveness and unconditional love with the moon in Pisces. But it's going to be painful, and there's going to be some painful realizations that are eventually going to and leaving us feeling perhaps very disempowered. Then to come back around at the beginning of the week here to start really, for things to start really moving and being activated and people expressing themselves in a very bold and angry way. I do feel like that's going to be a big part of this week, is that I don't want to say an eruption, but just more of a coming to a head in some ways that's very much rooted in the Andromedan signature of freedom, right? Enough. People are going to be like, enough. We want to be free, And if you're not going to allow us to be free, we're going to tell you how we feel about it. And also with a full moon, just like every full moon, we have to also let go of some things that are not going to, we need to let go of what's not serving our intention of finding our still point too. That's the other thing to keep in mind. We're going to see within ourselves how our disappointment and how our constant push for freedom of ourselves may have and our ego's expression may have worked, may work against us in some way. So we have to be mindful of that and be ready to let go of some things too, right? Especially be willing to let go of the disappointment as well, right? You don't want to keep holding on to that energy, especially when the moon comes into Taurus, right? It's going to meet Uranus. And so there will be some radical change of feeling. And remember that the moon is exalted in Taurus, so we'll really want to embed ourselves into the medium of our growth. So we can't hold on to all of this energy of disappointment and this really bold expression as we go into the rest of the second half of the lunar cycle, because it won't allow us to hold our stillness, which is what we really want to do. But we also, in order to do that, we also have to have the ability to express our disappointment and our frustration and our anger. And have and the other side of it too is to be able to hold that if we're being expressed too as well, right? Depending on who we are and what our role has been, we may need to be on the other side of that as well and be mature enough in order to really hear and listen to other people. So that's part of it too. So there's a lot of dynamics here, but it's really going to reach ahead, I think, with this full moon for sure. So anyway, I love you guys. Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate every one of you. And you're welcome, JM. And this is what I'm here to do. So I am glad that it's appreciated and it's actually coming forward, in a way that is making sense to you. So I'm going to be doing readings, today and, into tomorrow. So if you're still waiting, it's coming, I promise, today and tomorrow, because I was off all day yesterday. So, and most of Wednesday as well. So I'll be working through the weekend. You still have a couple days to book that flash sale. Man, this is going on 2 hours. Jeez, you guys are awesome. Couple more days to book that flash sale. How does it end, right? $99 to look at your astrology all the way up to the end of 2021. Really good tool to see how the eclipse season in particular is really going to initiate things for you in different parts of your life. So that's still an option. I'll post the flyer on social media again today just to remind people or give them some visual representation. So, and then, yeah, if you want to check out any other services, that's in the description box below the website. You can reach out. And of course, social media is accessible through the description box as well. So I love you guys. Have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. Be easy on yourself. Let things move through you. See them as opportunities for growth and evolution, on an internal level, and just be ready for next week to start moving forward, okay? And things start to happening. It's coming. I know it seems like it's not, but it definitely is. So love you guys. I will see you on Monday. Take care of yourself.